It's my pleasure to introduce the first of our two guest speakers. It's Ray Betler. Ray is going to be talking about considerations for ethical business relationships. Ray is a native of Pittsburgh. His academic background is impressive, as is his career history. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering and economics. I was always impressed by people who could get through the engineering programs. They're very demanding. He also has a Bachelor of Science degree in Administration and Management Science from Carnegie Mellon University. Ray's career began as a propulsion systems design engineer for Westinghouse, where he ultimately achieved the distinction of becoming the youngest head of engineering and the youngest president and CEO in the 120-year history of the company. His tenure with the organization spanned over 30 years and encompassed a variety of ownership transactions and numerous corporate structures. Subsequent to his retirement, Ray joined the board of directors of L.B. Foster Company in August of 2000 and was elected chairman in June of 2022. Impressively, his contributions to the community that are listed in his bio are almost as long as his career accomplishments. And I would encourage each of you to read through his bio and just see how much he gives back to the community. When I was talking to Ray earlier, he mentioned he's here to serve. That's his purpose in life. Again, today he's here to talk to us about considerations in ethical business relationships. Please welcome Ray Betler.
Thanks, John. Thank you. Good morning. It's good to be here today. I want to thank John, and I want to thank Megan and Colleen, and especially Mary Lou for the invitation and the opportunity to be here. Mary Lou has been especially a tremendous help in preparing this talk. I have a lot of material here, so I'm going to go through it quickly. I'll start with the bio. I'm not going to read this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the family part of myself. You can read that yourself. My wife and I, as John said, grew up in South Park. She grew up about 6 miles from me in Library, her in Windover Hills. We lived 3 miles toward each other from where we grew up. We started dating at 13. We've been together for 55 years, married for 46. We have 3 boys, Tim, Mike, and Matt. They're 44, 42, and 40. They went a different way than John just explained. Tim has a triple degree from Allegheny College in international business, writing and German. He has a double major from George Washington in international business, film documentary, and he is currently the director of multimedia for UPMC. He lives in Mount Lebanon, has 2 of our 10 grandchildren. Our middle son, Michael, did a double degree from Carnegie Mellon in chemical engineering, biomedical engineering. He then went to med school at LeCom up in Erie, where he became a general surgeon, did a 5-year residency in Brooklyn at a Trauma II hospital. He has our 4 youngest grandchildren and lives in Connecticut. And our baby is in Thomas Jefferson. He has our 4 oldest grandchildren. He did a bachelor's degree and master's at California University of Pennsylvania. He's been a technology education teacher at TJ for about almost 19 years and middle school football coach. So that's a family part of my family, and I'm going to move on to tell you a little bit about my career. It's interesting because my children, even though they have not the business responsibilities that I had day in and day out, they face ethical problems every day in their business, just like you do. My middle son, it's a doctor, that's a general surgeon that does everything from basically the heart to the knees. He actually took a correspondence course in medical ethics last year because he felt so strongly about the ethical issues he has to deal with each and every day. In your case, you're guided by this code of ethics, the code of professional conduct that is elaborated with 5 principles that speak to the responsibilities principle that require you to use sensitive professional and moral judgments in all activities. Your public interest principle, which requires you to act in a way that serves the public interest and honor public trust and demonstrate a commitment to professionalism. The integrity principle, which defines an expectation that you perform all professional responsibilities with the highest sense of integrity. The objectivity and independence principle, to be free of conflicts of interest and independent in fact and appearance when providing auditing services, and the due diligence or the due care principle, which mandates that you observe the profession's technical and ethical standards and strive continually to improve competence and quality of service. All of you are familiar with these principles. You're familiar with the Pennsylvania Institute of CPEs, or you won't be in the room. Other people in your organization that should be familiar are your CEO. I served as a CEO for 20 of my 41 years in my career. Your CFO and people in the accounting and finance organization. Also people that should be familiar are identified financial experts on boards. But the problem comes in the difference between practice and understanding. Problems normally don't occur because of a lack of understanding of requirements. They normally are well understood, the black and white portions. It's the gray portions that are the problems. The problems occur when people start to compromise, when people start to rationalize, and when people start to emotionalize. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some real life examples. And a lot of these I lived through. The first one is an example that is focused really on Siemens. But I should tell you that before I share this example, I was going to start by asking everybody in the room a simple question. How many of you have cheated on your expense account at one point in time or not in your career? And it sounds like a crazy question, and I wouldn't really ask it, even though I just did. But I can tell you that it's little things like putting a little bit of extra mileage on your expense account, adding a little bit more tip than you actually paid, adding a tip for an Uber driver you'd never paid. I have seen more people fired in my career for cheating on expense accounts than anything else that I've ever seen in terms of separations. And you ask yourself the question, why would people do that? Presumably they're making good money if they're working. You know, it's not a problem that there's a need. It's a problem that people start to rationalize and they think, you know, it's like the person in a shop that walks out with a little pocket full of nuts and bolts and hardware every day. And they say, I'm just going to use them for my project at home. Or the person who walks out with a little bit of scrap metal, maybe some copper, just to get some extra spending money every week. It's those kind of things that people start to rationalize. And those little problems lead to big problems. And they're definitive of corrupt cultures in organizations. And it sounds crazy, but those are the kinds of things where problems start. Take an organization like Siemens. Siemens, one of the biggest corporations in the world. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this. Between 2001 and 2007, they were investigated by the SEC. Now I'm going to give you the shortcut. They found $30 to $40 billion of bribery when they did their investigation. It was across their entire corporation. They found slush funds. They found that Siemens would keep briefcases of money with Post-it notes on so that people knew what they were for, but they could rip the Post-it notes up so there'd be no way to track it once they were used. They actually paid almost $1 billion to bribe people to get contracts for the Summer Olympics in 2004 in Athens. $1 billion across multiple businesses. It was the worst case of violations of Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that was investigated up to that point. They obtained mass transit lines in Venezuela, power plants in Israel, refineries in Mexico, telephone networks in Bangladesh, national identity cards in Argentina, and I can go on and on. At the end of the day, the SEC negotiated with Siemens. Siemens had agreed to pay. We had two, by the way, FBI agents come to the Wabtec board to brief us on this. Siemens agreed to pay $350 million in disgorgement fines. They paid to the SEC, $450 million to the Department of Justice to settle criminal charges. They paid $569 million to the Office of the Prosecutor General in Munich. And they had already paid $285 million of fines by October 2007. That's over $1.6 billion just in fines. And you know, a corporation like that has a lot of money, they just kept on moving. Here's the bizarre side story for all you local folks. This is the finding for the CEO and the executives in the company. They did their investigation. The independent investigation found that the company paid hundreds of millions of fines and bribes, but no indications of personal misconduct or that the CEO, Klaus Kleinfeld, had any knowledge of these events. What? This is the CEO in charge of this corporation. So what happened? The Siemens CEO and other Siemens executives negotiated. They were accused of failing to prevent corruption. And as a result, Klaus Kleinfeld personally negotiated a $2 million euro settlement without any criminal record associated. What happened next? Does anybody know? I remember, well, I was a young executive running my business. Klaus Kleinfeld was selected as chairman CEO of Alcoa. Now, Alcoa, I knew the previous CEO, Paul O'Neill, who was squeaky clean. He was the CEO from '87 to '99. He became the Secretary Treasurer under George W. Bush administration. They go from O'Neill, there was one in between, didn't do so well, O'Neill to Kleinfeld. What happens? Well, you probably can guess it. Kleinfeld came in, the performance waned, the arrogance went up, and the company split into the two companies that are Alcoa and Aeronautic today. And I asked myself, why would anybody, let alone a board of directors for this great American corporation that was headquartered in my hometown, do something as stupid as that? But they did. But they did. My father used to say, common sense is not common. That decision made no common sense, no business sense. Here's another example. Early in my career, one of my bosses held a focused leadership retreat for our human resources organization. On the last evening of that retreat, he took a female manager to have a drink because he told her that he wanted to help her to share his personal observations and advice with her. She was 3 levels down in the organization from him. She was thrilled that the CEO, who was about to move to Germany, would take an interest in her. But instead of help her, he got her drunk, very drunk. The next day she woke up, he was next to her in bed. So it had already been announced that the CEO was leaving. I was actually taking over as CEO. I had already done that transition. And that weekend, I went from church with my 2 sons to work to drop off some papers. She was already there with her 2 little boys, 3 and 1 years old, because she couldn't be at home. She saw my car come in, she came up to my office, and I could see right away something was really wrong. So I told my sons, take our little boys in the customer conference room, play with every electronic gadget you can. Don't come back till I come get you. And I sat down with this lady for an hour and talked to her. And I told her, she was a mess. She was convinced she had AIDS. She didn't know whether she should quit her job. We talked for over an hour, and I told her, look, if you want, I can get you expert professional help, counseling. But my advice is go home and tell your husband. Be honest with him. And she did that. Unfortunately, her husband was more of a man than my boss was because he forgave her. But that experience completely damaged her career to the point that she ended up moving out of state to start her life over again with her family. We're talking about ethics. This is sick stuff that really happened. Next example. I was blessed to be appointed President and CEO at age 38, the youngest CEO in a 120-year history of Westinghouse Transportation. We had just been acquired by large German corporation, Daimler-Benz. At that time, we were considering bidding on a transit system in Jacksonville. The base system, the first part of that system, had already been installed, commissioned by a French company. It wasn't working well, and they wanted to extend it. They didn't want the French to do it. A few months after that, I was invited to my first Daimler-Benz Executive International Forum in Luxembourg. It was a big deal. It was something that I was very excited about and honored to be invited. There weren't many Americans going. I got to Luxembourg, taxied to the hotel, went up to my room. As soon as I went into the room, the phone rang. This was before mobile phones. There was a guy with a funny accent on the phone. He said, "Is this Mr. Betler?" I said, "Yes." I thought it was a desk. I said, "Yes." He said, "I'm calling to ask if your company plans to bid on the Jacksonville project." The reality is that we hadn't decided because there were a lot of issues. But that wasn't public information. I asked, "Who is this?" He said, "I just want you to know, if you do not bid, there will be 5% of the project award value in a Swiss bank account for you." It was a $60 million project. I was 38. I replied to him, "I don't know who the hell you are, but I'm an American citizen. This conversation is over," and I put the phone down. I was pretty shook up, went downstairs to find my boss, who was German. And I found him, and I explained to him what happened. I said, "Klaus, I got this crazy call," and by the way, it wasn't Klaus Keinfeld. I got this crazy call, and I told him what happened, and he said to me, "Have you guys made a decision what you're going to do yet?" And I said, "No, the technology, we don't know. We don't have enough resources to support the project. We have them all applied to the Frankfurt airport system, and the timing, the period for the bid is very short. I don't think it makes sense for our business." His response was, "Okay, I'll take it from here." That was the last I heard about Jacksonville. Next example. Under different ownership, same company, a couple decades later, I lived in London for 2 years. I was asked to come back to Pittsburgh to run the worldwide turnkey systems business. At that time, we were doing a $1.5 billion bid for a system in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Shortly after I got back to Pittsburgh, one Saturday morning, I got a phone call from our chairman, who was from Quebec. Gives you an idea of the company. It was strange for him to call me directly, but after our exchange of greetings, he said, "Ray, for the KL system bid that you're preparing, I just want you to know that I personally assigned the bid leader. I know you just returned and you have plenty to do, so please allow him to complete the bid preparation." And the chairman was right. I had a lot to do, and the bid effort would have been intense, so I was appreciative. I thanked him and got on with what I was doing. About 6 weeks later, my general counsel came into my office and shut the door. He said, "Ray, I need to tell you something. Do you know the success fee percentage on the Kuala Lumpur bid?" I said, "No, David, I don't know. I'm not involved with the bids. You know that." A normal success fee for a project like that would be about 1 or 2%. He said, "It's 10%, it's 8%. I looked at him and asked, "How can that be? And what is it for?" He said, "The person leading the bid programmed it in." I asked him again, "What's it for?" His face got red and he said, 2% is for the actual success fee. 3% is going to the Prime Minister of Malaysia. 3% is going to the chairman. I stopped in my tracks and I looked at him and I said, "David, why are you telling me when you know I'm not involved with this?" He said, "I know you're not involved, but I report to you organizationally, and ultimately this is your business." He was right. I thanked him. He left the office. Now it was my headache. I knew the following week we were having a quarterly business review. So my boss, who was German, came to the review. We presented the Kuala Lumpur bid because I put it on the agenda. When we took a break after the morning session, we went into my office, and I asked my boss, the head of corporate HR who was there, the bid leader, and my general counsel to come with me. I sat them down at a round table, and I asked the bid leader, explain to our boss, his name was Wolfgang, explain to our boss what the success fee is for the Kuala Lumpur bid. He started to babble. The number never came out. I looked at my general counsel and I said, "Tell the story to Wolfgang exactly the way you told me 3 days ago," which he did. Boom. Problem solved. The success fee was removed. The bid leader was exposed. But I couldn't help but wonder how many other times had this same practice been done around the corporation under the same chairman, cheating off your own corporation. These, unfortunately, are real-life examples. There's plenty of other ones. You know about the Sam Bankman-Fried story that's going on right now. 2 weeks ago, front page of the Post-Gazette, Philips execs, okay of device sales scrutinized. If any of you knew the founder of Respironics, which I do, Jerry McGinnis, he is an incredible man. He built an incredible company, sold it to a Dutch owner now. These guys apparently are hiding test results on their sleep apnea machines for the last 2 years that identify that particles go into your lungs while you're using their machine. Rather than stop the sale of the machine and recall, they purposely continued selling. Their own salespeople were directed to continue in the distributors. This is going to be a mess, this story. And Jerry McGinnis would be rolling over in his grave if he knew something like this was going on in his company. Volkswagen, the $2.8 billion for fudging emissions testing. The famous one is he started a lot of these corporate discussions was Enron, where you had a $500,000 fine against Arthur Andersen. It was a maximum fine at the time. JP Morgan, Chase, and Citigroup had to pay $300 million fine in that Enron case. And Skilling and Lay ended up going to jail for 24 years. I think they served 12. Fraud, insider trading, Ponzi schemes, identity theft, embezzlement, counterfeiting, money laundering, espionage, sports fixing, art forgery. There's all kind of fraud goes on in our world. And you folks, many of you, are put in a position where you're supposed to be able to detect behaviors that could lead to that type of result. So you ask yourself, what could cause that kind of behavior? In my opinion, a big part of it is egos. Egos have a significant impact and influence over people's behaviors. Big egos sensationalize stories. They allow for juicy magazine articles, podcasts, books. Back when I was a young executive, probably the most revered CEO was Jack Welch. He wrote the book straight from the gut. And Jack Welch was someone that everybody worshiped in the business community. Jim Collins wrote the book Good to Great, which I'm sure many of you read, professor from Michigan, and he compared Westinghouse as a good corporation to GE as a great corporation. What happened to Westinghouse? You had one egotistical guy end up leading a corporation who decided that he wanted to create a financial services business that would rival GE Capital. The end result, they started to speculate on real estate. The end result, they had an audit. The real estate was overvalued $2.5 billion. That led to the end of Westinghouse. That's when we got sold, shortly after that, to Daimler-Benz. But GE, 30 years later, ended up in the same situation, the great corporation. What happened to them? They ended up in a situation where they had overvalued their long-term health care products by $30 billion. They had an audit. They had to do an $8 billion write-off. Their stock went under double digits. It was a terrible thing for the shareholders. But ironically, it was a great thing for me, because it gave me the opportunity from my experience at Westinghouse to recognize an opportunity at GE, and that they would have to go through a restructuring and spin off some businesses. So as soon as I saw it, I approached the CEO of GE Transportation, who eventually became the new CFO of the corporation, and asked her, would she go to headquarters and see if they'd be interested in selling GE Transportation. And the rest is history. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So I'm not sharing all these examples just for amusement or entertainment. Unfortunately, these giant corporations are pretty visible, but this stuff goes on in small businesses, in medium businesses, in mom and pop shops, in private businesses. And so for me, I reduce ethics down to a simple question. Is it possible for you to do what is right? There was a famous football coach, many of you I'm sure know and love him, Lou Holtz, who grew up just an hour from here in West Virginia. He had a saying, it's never the right time to do the wrong thing. And it's never the wrong time to do the right thing. So what is right? Right is to act ethically and with integrity in everything you do. You're expected to act with integrity, with objectivity, demonstrate professional competence, due care, confidentiality, and to act in a professional manner. You may not set the trend in an organization, but you definitely set an example, a personal example. I talked a lot about the bad examples, but there's plenty of good examples too. I'm going to share with you one here in a minute. So I don't want you to lose heart. There's plenty of good ethical companies around, but they are unique in and of themselves. And the question is what makes them unique? And I think what makes them unique is the value system they deploy. It starts, frankly, with the individuals that lead the business. One consistent character that you're going to find in ethical companies is that the leader has humility. The company that I want to talk to you about is Watco. This company was founded by a man named Dick Webb in 1983 in Pittsburgh, Kansas. His son, Rick Webb, joined the company in 1984 and became CEO and executive director. He's the executive chairman still today, 40 plus years later. Rick is, I know Rick very well. He is a humble, hardworking, smart, creative individual with a big heart and a passion to do what's right. Right toward his customers, right toward his team members, and right toward his suppliers and partners that depend on him. The company that started as a company with just one locomotive to serve a short line railroad now is about $1.6 billion in annual revenue with about 5,000 people. And they own their own short line railroads, marine terminals, and rail terminals. I visited one of Rick's facilities recently with Rick, and I can tell you that he is genuinely respected and appreciated by his team. He pushes constantly for improvements in his business, and he doesn't want yes people in his business. He relies on his team for their ideas, for their input, for their feedback, and for their advice on how best to do what they do each and every day so they can get better in the future. Everyone in Watco is there because of their respect for Rick and because they love what they're doing. And Rick has an ego just like you and I. But if you were with him in a crowd of Watco employees like this, you would not be able to discern which one is the executive chairman. Because he's constantly encouraging people to talk, to argue, to participate, to contribute, and reinforcing to them that they can expect to be properly rewarded for their efforts and contributions. Their most significant focus, because of the hazards and danger of what they do, is safety. That's paramount within their value system and their culture. The mission statement you'll see here, delivering a better tomorrow, sustainability is part of who we are, what we do every day. Watco seeks to shape a better future and is committed to being well-governed, socially responsible, and environmentally conscious company. Their values are reflected in the culture that they have, which again is focused on their customers, team members, and safety. It's our belief that taking care of these three areas is the right way to take care of business. By the way, Paul O'Neill's #1 focus that he communicated always in a boardroom, always with his employees, and always with the investors was safety. Impact. This company, now with 5,000 employees, has been voted, awarded, named the top most loved place to work in the US for the last 2 years. In this last year, they were awarded the top most loved place to work in the world. 100 companies. One of 100 companies in the world is a little company in Pittsburgh, Kansas. I can talk about other businesses too. I'm pretty proud of Dollar Bank that has a 170-year history here as the largest mutual bank in Pittsburgh. It's another hidden gem. But what Rick and his family have done is incredible. So how did they become the most loved place? They collaborate throughout their companies, knocking down silos. They have a positive vision for the future that everyone participates in, but the leadership team is expected to lead. They show respect for one another with an open door policy that cuts across organizations as well as up and down in their facility. They support one another in all kinds of ways, professionally and personally. They have their own university, like a lot of organizations do. They have a value system that's aligned with their employees, and they immerse their new employees, not in technical training and job training. Their first orientation is in culture and values when they come into the company. They have a place that when you come into the company, you get a WACO welcome kit. Somebody delivers it to you personally at your desk or in your shop or wherever you're working. So it's like the neighbor that comes when you move into a new home. And it has all kinds of products and opportunities for you to not only know the organization, but the people in the organization. So Rick serves as a servant model of humility, and he sets the example that he's not above the roles. He asks his employees if they see him breaching any roles, whether they be safety or other protocols in the company, to please challenge him on that. And then in addition, they have a lot of great benefits, like the first $1,000 out of pocket for health expenses for a family, WACO pays for every year. So knowing Rick, I'm confident that this company is going to continue to grow. You can't buy stock because it's private. It'll continue to be successful, not only to set standards of performance in the industry, but standards of ethical behavior. It'll continue to delight customers and team members and keep all who interface with WACO safe. The company epitomizes all that Rick stands for. Rick does what is right. When I ran businesses, my focus was very much the same. To serve the people. My belief from the time I was given a management job at age 28 was that I work for the people in the company, not the other way around. That was true when I had my first 10 people in my organization, as much as it was when I had 27,000 in the final organization that I led. So let's talk about mergers and acquisitions, since that's the theme of your discussion. I've been involved with probably 50 mergers and acquisition transactions throughout my career. The last transaction was the biggest one, obviously. It was a transaction to buy GE Transportation. I should tell you, GE tried to buy us 5 years earlier. So it was the Lord's blessing that we were in a situation that we could turn it around and buy them. We each represented about $4.5 billion in annual revenue. The combined company was about 27,000, and we paid $11 billion for the transaction. I notice in the agenda you're going to talk about now the other end of acquisitions next. So with the last discussion and the one to come, you can apply this specific case to that. The issues that we faced were obviously valuation issues and all the other issues just discussed. They were tactical, operational, regulatory compliance, but they need to start with one specific thing, and that's a sound strategy. If you don't have a sound strategy for your M&A activity, it's probably not going to be successful when you integrate. Since M&A is a major theme for the conference, let's discuss a little bit about the role of audit in due diligence, acquisition, and integration. The key here is never to assume. Don't assume that businesses being acquired are clean. Don't assume that if problems exist, that they're not significant enough to worry about, they'll get fixed after the acquisition. In today's world, it's not uncommon, for instance, to find illegal immigrants working in the company you're buying. Just one example. Valuation of inventories are often an issue. I can go on, but let me just say that it's critical that a thorough due diligence process is accomplished by the buyer, utilizing the expertise of service providers. There normally will be a timeline, Mark talked about that the buyer is trying to meet. Sometimes the buyer is their own worst enemy. They want to prioritize the wrong thing. They push firms like your firm to accelerate the work, which implies that they would accept you taking shortcuts in their process and your process. Don't ever get caught in that trap by trying to be a good business partner and valued service provider. Because if things do go wrong, I guarantee you they're coming back to you, and they'll put the blame right at your table. So do your job, do it well, and don't compromise your process. When two companies are brought together, they naturally have two different corporate cultures. One company is the buyer, one's being acquired. Many times, CEOs don't have the courage to be honest and direct, and to tell those being acquired that they are going to be expected to adjust, to change, to conform to the buying company's values, culture, behaviors, and norms. Trying to look like the good guy for that period and suggest that the old company's culture and norms are going to stay intact is cowardly, it's naive, and it's destructive. The new company must be fair, considerate, and professional, but also have very specific plans to make the transition as effective and expeditious as possible. The integration takes time. Things will be discovered that were not disclosed in the due diligence process, and to the extent there's errors, identify the errors and address them. They're not going away. In parallel, learn from the mistake and adjust the acquisition process. To the extent the errors were deliberate, they were hidden, you have to deal with the issue, but you also have to deal with the people involved. The bottom line is that acquisitions are done to add value. The goal is to maximize accretion in the first year. People being acquired need to recognize that the best way for them personally to be accepted in the new company is to extend themselves to the greatest extent possible and to focus on adding value. People in the acquiring company should make an effort to get to know their new colleagues, to treat them with respect and dignity, to develop a culture of trust. A little empathy in a situation like that will go a long way, especially during the heat of the battle. So family feud. In order to have a family feud, you need to have a family. So do you think of your business, of your work, of your organization as a family? We did in my business. In fact, in my first business, we established core values that exemplified principles of a strong family, of a healthy family. We have 5 core values: trust and respect, customer orientation, teamwork and cooperation, effective communication, and proactive leadership. Everything we did across our 2,500 member worldwide organization, we did with our value system as a backdrop. Like most families, when we violated our core values, we got in trouble. When we got in trouble, there were consequences, corrective action, and opportunities for organizational learning. One of the most important attributes, if not the most important, expected behavior coming out of our core values was humility. Humility is something that can create excellence. The lack of humility can destroy organizations. and destroy individuals. I can't tell you how many extremely capable, presumably capable leaders I've known in my life that have failed simply because of a lack of humility. My comment in our international executive meetings would always be the same: egos kill. The premise is universal and it's alive and well today, believe me. I can guarantee you. Egos can harm a career, can harm a business, and can lead people to do unethical things. Go back to Jack Welch. The revenue recognition policy used for those long-term health care policies was put in place 30 years earlier and propagated through that organization. So, smart people do stupid things. And you ask why? Because they're arrogant, because their egos convince themselves that they can get away with it. They rarely do. In a family, in a strong organization, your focus should be on focusing on serving one another. So put yourself last, or at least second. Understand the needs and requirements of those around you, especially those who depend on you, and address those needs. Yes, your employer has an obligation to you as an employee, but you have an obligation as an employee to your employer. So deliver on your requirements. That's why you're here, that's why you're compensated. It should always be a fair, transparent, open, honest, two-way street. At the end of the day, you should walk away from your job feeling that you did your job, met the expectations that were established for you, and you should feel that you were fairly compensated for those contributions. Everything should be fair to you and to your company. If it's not, you should constructively address it. What's your role and responsibility? We talked a lot about organizational and regulatory compliance requirements. So where did each of you fit in as individuals? You have a voice, an important voice. Your job is not to be a guard dog. Your job is not to be a business partner, service provider, informed expert while being a compliance officer. What's needed to perform effectively in that capacity? We're back to values. In this case, your personal values and your willingness to embrace broader organizational values, teamwork and cooperation. These terms can easily be misconstrued in today's world. You're truly a team member when you're performing an audit, but do you feel like a team member as an auditor? Within a broader context of a team? What and who constitutes the team? To me, the answer to that question is dependent on a degree of openness and transparency that you want to exist and to demonstrate. I'll just say that the opportunity is there for you to have a valuable voice at the table, and you should humbly but proactively take initiative to express that voice. I want to speak to you a moment as an employee. Many here are members of Grossman, Yannick & Ford, a private firm. Many are from other organizations. Your firm can make decisions that positively impact your professional life and obviously your personal life and your family. So what's your responsibility in return? Your responsibility is to set an example of integrity, honesty, transparency, compliance, and commitment. You should take the initiative and be a positive example to all those around you each and every day. Your responsibility is to follow the rules and the guidelines that were established by your firm. If you don't like the rules, your responsibility is to follow the rules and constructively work in parallel to adjust those rules within whatever framework has been provided to you to do so. You should always demonstrate respect for your employer and apply a strong, diligent work ethic to add value. You should not envy your founders, your firm, your partner, your CEO, the executive team, and those in your chain of command. Rather, you should personally decide if you want their job someday. And if you do, work to earn that. And if you don't, work just as hard to contribute each and every day. That's a personal choice you make. Focus on adding value, and remember that to the extent you can, always be positive in your example. Be positive, set an example of integrity, objectivity, pursue education, ask questions if uncertain. In a family feud, tough issues can be solved with constructive conflict resolution, through good communications, through genuine curiosity, and through cooperation in mutually solving problems. But always remember, you and no one else bears the consequence of your action. So do what is right. Thank you. Do you want some questions? Or no?
Yeah, we can do questions.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Ray, for a great presentation. Very inspiring and compelling, and I think it's a great, reminder for all of us to exhibit humility and integrity and ethics in everything that we do. Often those very small things are very impactful to the people in our organizations, and those people notice those things. So it is important that we're aware of everything that we do.